Hello everyone, I'm Kuba Stephen of Social Work Department from Rajiv Gandhi National Institute of Youth Development. Today in this video, I'm going to explain experimental research design. So in order to understand this experimental research, let us try to break it down and understand, first of all, experimental or experiment. According to Oxford Dictionary, it is an invention or a product based on utilized idea or techniques and not yet established or finalized. An operation or produced carry out under control conditions in order to discover an unknown effects of law to test or establish a hypothesis or an illusion for a known law. So experimental research design. Let us go to the main topic. Experimental research design is a scientific and a systematic methods of research. Researcher has a strong control over variables. It manipulates independent variables to see its effects on dependent variables. A causal relation exists when one variable in a data sets a direct influence on another variable, also known as cause and effect relation. For example, warm weather causes more sales on cooler. Here, warm weather is a independent variables and sells more on like AC and cooler. It is here. This is a dependent variables. So, as I have mentioned, independent variable affects the dependent variable. It is used to determine the cause and effects relationship. Researchers conduct a scientific approach using two sets of variables. So let us try to understand what is variables. A variable is any characteristics, number, or quality that can be measured or counted. A variable can also be called a data item. For example, an individual age, an age of an individual person, sex, business income and expenditures, birth, country of birth, capital expenditure, class, grade, and so on. And there are two types of variable, that is dependent and independent variables, as I have also mentioned before. Those which affects other variables are called independent variables. Those which get affected by other variables are called dependent variable. In a study to determine whether how long a student's sleep affects test score, the dependent variable is the length of time sleep. The independent variable is the length of time spent sleeping, while the dependent variable is the test score. I'll give you another example of it. COVID-19 is spread all over the world. All scientists in the world inside a laboratory are using different medicines on COVID or corona to see the effect of different medicines on corona sample, to see the effects of different medicine on the removal of disease. So here, medicine is the independent variables, and corona is the dependent variable. A researcher, okay, let me give you another example. A researcher want to examine the effect of advertisement on customer demands. So here, the independent variable. Okay, let me next move on to the next topic, that is characteristics of experimental research. It is controlled by the researcher. Most of the time, it is also controlled by the researcher. It is manipulated by the researcher. It is also based on observation, replication. Okay, next. Steps in experimental research. Selecting and defining the problem. Problem should be defined in an operational terms. Surveying the literature. researchers need to acquire up-to-date information related to the problems. Starting off hypothesis. Next is consulting the experimental plan. It includes identifying all non-experimental variables and control them. Construct a research design. Selection of sample and assign experimental treatment to samples. Outline procedures of collecting data, state of hypothesis. Next, let me move on to advantages of experimental research design. Point number 1, it gives researcher a high level of control. When people conduct experimental research, they manipulate the variables so they can create a setting that let them observe a phenomenon that they want. They can remove or control other factors that affects the overall result, which means they can narrow their focus and concentrate solely on 2 or 3 variables. For example, a scientist conduct studies in which they give a new kind of drugs to a group of subjects and a placebo drug to another group. They can give the same kind of food to the subject and every house them in the same area to ensure that they won't be exposed to other factors that they may be affect how the drugs work. At the end of the study, the researcher analyzed this result to see how the new drug affect the subject and identify its side effects and adverse results. Second, it allows the researcher to utilize many variables. So this is the second advantages. As mentioned above, researchers have most fulfilled control when they conduct experimental research study. It let them manipulate variables to use as many variables as they want to create an environment where they can test their hypothesis without destroying the validity of the research design. In the example above, the research can opt to aid the third party of subject who would be given well-known and widely available drugs that they can be used by many people for years. This way they can compare how a new drugs perform compared to the previous drug as well as the widely used drug. The point number 3, the third advantages it lead to an excellent result. The very nature of experimental research allowed to easily understand the relationship between the variables, the subject and the environment, and identify the cause and effects in wherever phenomena they study. Experimental research can also be easily replicated, which means the researcher themselves on the other scientists to repeat their studies, to confirm the studies, to test the variable. It can be used in different fields. Experimental research, the point number 4, the 4 advantages is it can be used in different fields. Experimental research is usually utilized in the medicines and industries to assess the effects of various treatments and drugs. It is also used in other fields like chemistry, biology, physics, engineering, electronics, agriculture, social science, and so on. However, despite the advantages, there are also disadvantages of experimental research. In short, let me just highlight to you the point. It leads to artificial situations. It also takes a lot of times and money. Experimental research can also be affected by errors. So and the next point is it might not be feasible in some situations. So in conclusion, experimental research has become an important part of history of the world, which leads to numerous discovery. Experimental research has become an important part of history of the world, and it has led to numerous discovery that has made people's life better, longer, and more comfortable. However, it cannot be denied that it also have disadvantages. So the upcoming scientist and the researcher to find balance between the benefits and it provides and also the drawbacks of the present. So thank you very much. With this, I come to the conclusion, to the end of my video. Thank you.